Welcome back to the breakdown. Today we're going to be taking a look at the FCC's plans to cut back on robocalls. Now we've all gotten them, right? Your bank account, your car insurance, more recently things like Amazon and more are trying to reach you about something. Please press 1 to confirm. Now these types of scams are been a major issue. They're growing. Even to this day, people are still falling for them, even though we talk over and over and over about that car insurance video or call or that Amazon call is not a real one. People still fall victim to them. So the FCC is doing quite a few things to crack down on it. Now this won't stop all scams. There's still the direct calls, but a lot of scammers like to use robocalls to kind of filter out their potential victims, we'll call them. And people who they believe will be high risk, they direct call often. But you and I and many other people probably have had hundreds of calls. I think at one point I was getting 6 or 7 a day, it felt like. And with my job, I got a lot of calls from numbers I didn't recognize, so I wasn't in a position to just decline any phone call where I didn't know the number. But I will say recently they've been successful in limiting that, and the FCC has more plans on the horizons to help prevent robocalls from continuing. So what are they doing? What will help stop these robocalls? We're going to break that all down in this video so you can understand what's happening. Now, if you're new here, do me a big favor, hit that subscribe button, hit that thumbs up as we help grow this new channel. I appreciate your help here as we break down everything happening in the world and hopefully help you learn something new. All right. Number one, the thing that Amazon is doing first and foremost to cut back on robocalls is cracking down on IP phone services. A lot of these robocalls have recently been generating from IP phone services. Now you probably know a lot of the big ones out there where you don't actually have a physical phone company run a line to your house and run it that way. More often these are just done over the internet through an IP service. You connect a box to your internet, you have a phone system. Many of the traditional phone companies have cracked down on these robocalls. For one, it ties up their networks a lot. It costs them money because they're mass dialing hundreds if not thousands of people a day, depending on the size of your operation. Now though, they're switching over to IP. And the FCC is actually threatening many companies that if they don't crack down on this, implement their systems, that they could face massive fines. Some telemarketers that are found to be abusing robocalls are facing hundreds of million dollars, I should say, in fines per company. So we'll see how it goes. But the FCC is really going after the IP phone services. So what are some of the things they're doing with that? Well, one of the big things is creating a database of companies who do support what they call a handshake system, a system to verify that the caller ID is real and to crack down on robocalling. You probably got it. You look at your phone and it says IRS or it says FBI or something. And what that is they're spoofing the caller ID to make it look like they're calling from somewhere similar to you or somewhere important. Probably noticed too, maybe the phone number is only a few digits off from yours, for example. Now the FCC has created a database and set standards that companies must implement certain systems to help block fake caller IDs and help block robocalling. If they don't do that by the end of September 2021, other companies may block connections to them. So if I using some sketchy phone service that is used a lot for robocalls, I make a call, Verizon, AT&T, T-Mobile, and more can just look at that and say, hey, you're not listed on the database. That company hasn't implemented the proper protections for robocalls. We're going to deny access from that network to our network until they do. And the FCC has granted companies permission to do that. You're probably saying, well, what about legitimate phone calls? Well, to be honest, a lot of these companies that are major ones, the cellular companies and more here in the US, the companies you've heard of, have all implemented this system and will be in that registry come September 2021. It's some of the smaller companies from around the world, especially those IP ones that pop up here and there and are around just long enough to make a bunch of robocalls and then vanish again. Those are the companies that are going to have a problem here because they're not completing all the required documentation to show that they're cutting down on fake caller IDs and fake robocalls to continue making calls. We'll have to see how that works. But this database is basically a list of companies who have effectively entered in their information to prevent robocalls. I actually like that idea, that there's a community standard that says all these companies will abide by these efforts to stop illegal efforts, and if you don't, then you're not going to get access to it. So it's kind of a nice system. The FCC is also working on partnering with Verizon, AT&T, T-Mobile, and more, a lot of the big companies in town and around the world, to create more and newer standards. Now, the problem with all this is it's kind of a chess game, right? I make a move to block you, you make a move to counter my move, and it's a little bit back and forth. The FCC is trying to work on a more broad basis. Now, Verizon, T-Mobile, all these companies have their system. Google has a pretty effective one. I love it. When it pops up on my Android phone in a big red background, it says suspected spam caller. I can report spam and more. And they even filter spam text messages now, which I love. But when you have all these different companies independently doing their own thing, it kind of creates a situation where T-Mobile system has something cool that maybe AT&T has, but AT&T does something else that's kind of cool that T-Mobile doesn't have. Or how do you communicate, right? Maybe the systems aren't properly communicating and you get false positives because there is miscommunication between multiple companies. Now, with this effort of the FCC trying to lead an effort between these massive companies to standardize these efforts, to make them available to everybody, and help them develop these efforts, use the resources of the federal government to do it. Now, one of the primary functions of the federal government is national defense and interstate commerce. And one of the things that can definitely be considered interstate commerce is our communications, whether that be by phone or email or more. The Interstate Commerce Clause has been used to regulate phone calls and more for a very long time. And that's the power that they're using here to try to crack down on this. In a similar way that they would crack down on fraudulent mail scams. The post office, for example, has a massive organization of people who crack down on phone scams. Now it seems the FCC is creating their own, post office does mail scams. Now the FCC is creating their own system to crack down on phone scams. It's kind of an interesting move. I really like it. I think this is the kind of stuff that when these things become this big and dangerous, yeah, we do need to crack down on. And the ability to communicate and work together as a whole is one of the great things here. So I like it. Now it'll be interesting to see how this plays out because it's always a chess game, right? The ability to block calls from these smaller, low black networks, we'll call them, these ones that pop up in the dark of the night and just do a few phone calls and then vanish again in the dark of the night. Those IP services can be kind of hard to track down because they're popping up here and they're popping up there. The ability to come and say, hey, I don't care if you're a brand new company, you're not in the database that you're doing whatever is required to block robocalls and fake caller IDs. You're not going to pop up these dark, we'll call them, these dark networks of phone networks in the middle of the night that pop up and spam a bunch of calls, or middle of the day, but you know what I mean, and then vanish, are going to be a lot harder under this system. So let me know what you think. Have you noticed a change in your phone calls, the number of spam calls? I do believe, compared to a year ago, especially compared to 2 or 3 years ago, I get a lot less. Even though with my job, I don't really have the ability to just say, hey, I can't, if I don't know your number, I'm not answering it. And the reason behind that is that I work in a world where my number was part of press releases and more, and I'll get companies calling me, and I need to be available to them. So keep that in mind. Let me know what you think of these efforts. Is there anything more you'd like to do? Have you done anything to try to crack down on all these robocalls? I'll love to hear from you. Well, that's it for today. If you're new here, do me a favor, hit the subscribe button, hit the thumbs up. It really does help us because it lets YouTube know you enjoy what we do here. And hopefully we can help you learn something new about the world around you. Thanks for your support. I really appreciate it. Take care, everybody.